Violence continued in the Middle East this week despite a ceasefire accord. We have an exclusive interview with former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Jeane Kirkpatrick. But first, this past week, hundreds of undocumented immigrants rallied in Homestead to demand the right to live and work legally in this country. The demonstration was coordinated by the National Coalition for Dignity and Amnesty, which wants Congress to legalize 6 million illegal aliens. So far this year, the U.S. Border Patrol has detained nearly 7,000 undocumented immigrants in Miami, compared to 7,000 for all of last year. Joining us for this discussion are John Gage, Steering Committee member of the National Coalition for Dignity and Amnesty, and David Colquitt, board member of the group Floridians for Sustainable Population, which opposes the amnesty movement. Making up our panel of journalists are Alina Lambier, state national and foreign editor of the Sun-Sentinel, and Eve Colin, writer for the Miami Herald. Welcome all to the program. Let me ask you, if we do pass this legislation, if we do grant undocumented worker legal resident status, how do we keep this from increasing more immigrants coming to the United States because they may in fact think that sooner or later the United States is going to grant them legal resident status? What do you think?
Well, I don't think there's any legislation that's active right now that's going to meet the demand for a general unconditional amnesty, which is what I'm for and the National Coalition is for, and what I think is needed, which would cover not only the millions of immigrants who are here that are working the hardest and the lowest paying jobs, but would also cover those 350,000 immigrants who were not covered by the '86 amnesty, the late amnesty, and it would also cover the 1.5 million Hondurans, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, and Haitians who were not qualified under the NCARA Act, which was passed in 1997. I don't believe you can prevent immigration when you have a policy internationally that causes a situation where there's tremendous unemployment and there's also political repression. That's why people come to the country in the first place.
John Gage says you can't prevent it. What do you say?
My problem with this amnesty is that it has been proven that another amnesty will cause more illegal immigration. In 1986, the American people were told this was going to be the last amnesty. Since then, the illegal amnesty population has increased from 5 million to 6 million. We are going to continue the exploitation of this group if we provide another amnesty. The problem is that the politicians are not addressing illegal immigration. They are pandering for votes to ethnic minority groups.
Well, how do you stop illegal immigration? I mean, you seem to say, John Gage says that it's difficult or impossible to stop. I guess you're saying that it's enforceable. How do you do it?
Many countries have enforced their laws. We need an attitude change so that we go back to the 70s where we strive for U.S. population stabilization. Since 1970, there's been 30 million immigrants, legal and illegal. This has put a tremendous strain on our schools, on our environment, and all of our social systems. We need to get back to the 1970s attitude of population stabilization, and this amnesty is absolutely going to make the problem of exploitation and illegal immigration worse. The numbers prove it.
All of us in this country are either descendants of immigrants or immigrants. And the reasons that people came here haven't changed over the centuries. It's because it's economic opportunity or you were fleeing some political repression. If you want to prevent immigration to the United States, you're going to have help other countries with economic development. The current policies is to enforce through the World Bank, the IMF, and so on, austerity in third world countries. That's why people are leaving. The consequences of the instability economically are felt internationally. Here in the United States, there's over 38%, in Florida in particular, a workforce that's paid less than poverty level wages.
But John...
They can't survive.
But John...
But this is who's doing our work in the United States.
Let's get Mr. Colquitt in.
These people, these illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, have broken the law. They should go through the same procedure that legal immigrants have done. And just to amnesty them or reward them for their illegal behavior is undermining the immigration laws of the United States. The Statue of Liberty has in left hand a book of laws. We need to be ruled by laws, and this is what's happening. They are pandering for votes. They are not trying to help these people.
I don't think the idea of an amnesty is going to work, and I'll have to, a lot of people disagree with you on the idea of the strains that are being put on. I think it's the other way. We're looking at it as the richness that is being added to this country. This country is changing, and we are not, we can't bury our head in the sand. But I think the idea of amnesty is not going to go through this year anyway. This is an election year, and yes, maybe the politicians are pandering, but neither the Democrats or the Republicans want to be caught being the ones who open the quote-unquote floodgates.
But the labor unions are in favor of this, which is a very new and interesting aspect, because previously labor unions were opposed to immigration. Alina Lambier, your thoughts?
Well, I think that the labor unions are for this because they see that there are holes in jobs that they need filled. However, they also want to be able to make sure that their employees are going to be paid a certain level. And so they're for this so that these groups are not exploited.
And most of the members of these unions now are recent immigrants, are children of immigrants as well.
If you want to organize workers in this country today, you're going to end up organizing immigrant workers because they carry the hardest and the lowest paying jobs in construction, in the agriculture, in the restaurant business, in the home care business. They're the ones that are doing the work. So when the unions turn to organize them, they have to take up their demands for amnesty and legalization.
I just don't think...
And the unions are only trying to increase their role. They're not trying to help the American worker. By flooding more immigrants in, they are keeping wages down and hurting the American worker. They're out for the union bosses, not for the American worker. And I'd like to make one point about the richness of immigrants. That is very true. But when people talk about immigration, they need to talk about the other side, about the overcrowding of our schools that immigration is bringing. There are tremendous costs of bringing these wonderful people to the United States. There are costs. Let's talk about the costs.
Well, let's ask.
It just seems that we are not going to prevent immigration. I mean, other than raising walls around this country, we're not going to prevent it. Some of these people are already here. They're already using our services. They're already working, and they're part of our society. I mean, to pretend like we can just get rid of them, I mean, that's not going to happen either. So there's got to be some sort of controlled and systematic way in which they can go through a process.
But we're not going to resolve this illegal alien problem by rewarding them with residency. That's my concern.
John Gage, what about the cost issue of illegal immigration?
To understand the U.S. policy, which covers the companies that exploit the immigrant workers, the government which agrees with this sort of setup, and the INS which is supposed to enforce it, you have to understand what the deadly game that's being played. The goal is not to end immigration. The goal is to deport some immigrants, harass and have hanging over everyone's head the threat of deportation so that you can have a pariah workforce that doesn't have rights, that is fearful to speak up, and more difficult to unionize. The reason for all of this is it's extremely profitable to pay low wages. The big victory that was scored this year is when the AFL-CIO came out and said, we recognize this problem and we're going to call for a new amnesty program. It's not going to happen this year in Congress. We're going to have to fight for it next year. That has to be our goal.
I just don't think that the America is ready for that. And, you know, there are several other measures that are before Congress, that will come up before Congress again, measures that have been advanced by people like Senator Edward Kennedy and Senator Graham here in Florida, that more gradually would be more inclusive, the measures to help Haitians specifically, and Salvadorans and Guatemalans here in this country. But I'm not sure that...
Nobody has answered the question, if we increase the number of illegal aliens, how are we going to resolve these problems?
But are you saying that this policy is going to increase the number of illegal aliens?
Absolutely. Since 1986, the illegal alien population has increased from 5 million to 6 million.
But what Alina says is that, what do you want to do? Do you want to just, the people who are here, who are living in shadows?
They're already here.
They are working, they are paying taxes.
They're already here and paying taxes.
People
bring
don't
up
come
the
here.
issue of taxes. How many of these illegal aliens do not pay taxes? We know a large number of them
I'm
don't,
gonna
and
give
those that do pay taxes...
John Gage gets the last 20 seconds of this
All right.
discussion, I'm afraid.
People don't come here because they think they're going to get amnesty. They're driven here because by necessity to get a job. Once they're here, many have been here for decades, then they begin to fight for their rights, and they want things like amnesty.
Okay, and you got the last word. Thanks so much to John Gage of the National Coalition for Dignity and Amnesty, and David Colquitt of Floridians for Sustainable Population. Moving on,